In the vast expanse of space, where 1,000 civilizations have risen and fallen, there exists a truth that even the most advanced species dare not speak aloud: humans should never have survived their first contact with the galaxy. They were too young, too primitive, too reckless. Their planet was a backwater rock in an unremarkable system, and their technology barely qualified as spacefaring. Yet somehow, against all cosmic odds, humanity not only survived but thrived in ways that defied every predictable model the galaxy's greatest minds had constructed. The Galactic Council's most elite institution, the Nexus Academy, had stood for 12,000 years as the pinnacle of universal education. Only the most exceptional beings from the most advanced civilizations earned the right to walk its crystalline halls. Its graduates went on to shape the destiny of entire star systems, wielding power that could bend the very fabric of reality to their will. But, now, for the first time in its illustrious history, the Academy had accepted a human student. What the faculty didn't know, what no one in the galaxy could have possibly known, was that this seemingly ordinary girl from Earth carried within her something that would either save the universe or destroy it completely. And she herself had no idea that her acceptance letter was about to change not just her life, but the fate of every living being across 1,000,000 worlds. The question wasn't whether the galaxy was ready for humanity. The question was whether humanity was ready for what she was about to become. Maya Chen pressed her face against the transparent aluminum viewport of the transport vessel, watching in stunned silence as the Nexus Academy materialized before her. The structure defied every law of physics she thought she understood. Massive crystalline spires twisted through space like frozen lightning, connected by bridges of pure energy that pulsed with colors that had no names in any human language. The Academy wasn't just built in space, it seemed to exist partially outside of normal spacetime, its edges shimmering with an otherworldly luminescence. First time seeing the Academy, human? The voice belonged to her traveling companion, a being called Zephyr whose species, the Altarians, resembled what humans might imagine angels to look like if angels were 12 feet tall, had skin that shifted between silver and gold, and possessed 4 arms that ended in delicate, crystalline fingers. Maya nodded, unable to find words. She had grown up in suburban Denver, where the biggest architectural marvel was the old mall downtown. This was like trying to compare a sandcastle to Mount Everest. It never gets old, Zephyr continued, their voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate directly in Maya's bones. I've been a student here for 15 cycles, and every time I return from break, I'm reminded why the Academy is considered the crown jewel of galactic civilization. 15 cycles. Maya did the quick mental math that was roughly 30 Earth years. Zephyr had been studying here longer than Maya had been alive, yet they spoke of it as if they were still a newcomer. The thought sent a chill down her spine. What exactly had she gotten herself into? The transport vessel, sleek and organic-looking like most Altarian technology, glided effortlessly toward one of the Academy's docking bays. As they drew closer, Maya could see other ships arriving. Some looked like geometric puzzles made of light, others resembled living creatures the size of buildings, and a few appeared to be constructed from what looked like crystallized time itself. Those are temporal drifters, Zephyr explained, noticing her stare. The Chronarch students use them. Fascinating people, though their concept of linear conversation can be challenging. Maya had read about the major galactic species during her preparation for the Academy, but reading about them and seeing evidence of their technology were entirely different experiences. The Chronarchs existed partially outside of time, experiencing past, present, and future simultaneously. The Voidborn could manipulate dark matter with their thoughts. The Ethereals were pure energy beings who had transcended physical form millennia ago. And then, there were dozens of other species, each with abilities that bordered on magical from a human perspective. And, somehow, she was supposed to study alongside them. The docking bay was a marvel in itself, a vast space that seemed to extend infinitely in all directions, yet somehow accommodated ships of wildly different sizes without any apparent crowding. Maya watched as a vessel the size of a small moon settled gracefully next to a ship no bigger than a school bus, the space around them bending and reshaping itself to accommodate both. Dimensional folding, Zephyr said casually, as if discussing the weather. The Academy exists in what you humans would call expanded space. The interior is significantly larger than the exterior would suggest. As their transport touched down with barely a whisper of contact, Maya felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She had been the valedictorian of her high school, had earned a full scholarship to MIT, and had scored in the 99th percentile on every standardized test humanity had devised. But those achievements felt laughably insignificant now. The Academy's acceptance letter had arrived 3 months ago, delivered not by any earthly postal service but by a being of pure light who had materialized in her parents' living room during dinner. The creature, who politely introduced themselves as admissions coordinator Luminex, had explained that Maya had been selected based on criteria that transcended mere academic achievement. Something about her resonance patterns and probability matrices had caught the Academy's attention. Maya still didn't understand what any of that meant. The transport doors opened with a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, and Maya stepped onto the Academy's docking platform. The air here was different, not just in composition, though her orientation package had warned her about the elevated oxygen content and trace amounts of elements that didn't exist on Earth. It felt charged, electric with possibility. Every breath seemed to carry whispers of knowledge from 1,000 different worlds. "Welcome to Nexus Academy, Student Chen." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Maya spun around, trying to locate the speaker, and found herself face to face with something that hurt to look at directly. It was roughly humanoid in shape but seemed to be constructed from shifting geometric patterns that folded in on themselves in ways that made her eyes water. "I am Dean Axiom," the being continued, their voice now seeming to originate from inside Maya's own head. "I am what your species would classify as a fifth-dimensional entity. I serve as the primary administrative consciousness for new student orientation." Maya tried to speak but found her throat had gone completely dry. This was really happening. She was really here. "Do not be concerned by the sensory disorientation," Dean Axiom said, apparently reading her distress. "The Academy exists at the confluence of multiple dimensional planes. Your human perception systems will adapt within a few local days. In the meantime, you have been assigned a peer mentor to assist with your transition." A new figure approached from across the docking bay, and Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her. This being, while clearly not human, was at least comprehensible to her visual cortex. They appeared to be roughly her own age, with blue-tinted skin and large, luminous eyes that seemed to hold starlight. Most remarkably, they moved with a grace that suggested they were slightly lighter than they should be, as if gravity affected them differently. "I'm Kale Starweaver," the being said, extending a hand in what Maya recognized as a deliberately human gesture. "I'm from Aquanis Prime, second-year student in advanced cosmic engineering with a minor in dimensional mathematics. I've been assigned as your orientation partner." Maya shook his hand, surprised by how normal it felt despite the slight blue luminescence of his skin. "Maya Chen," she managed to say. "I'm from Earth. I'm not actually sure what I'm studying yet." Kale's expression shifted to something that might have been surprise. "You weren't accepted into a specific program? That's unusual. Most beings apply for particular fields of study. What were your application parameters?" "I didn't apply," Maya said, feeling increasingly out of place. "They just showed up and offered me a place." Both Kale and Dean Axiom went perfectly still. In the background, Maya noticed that several nearby conversations had stopped, and she could feel eyes, or the equivalent sensory organs, of various species turning toward her. "You were directly recruited?" Dean Axiom's voice carried new harmonics that Maya couldn't interpret. "By whom?" "Someone called admissions coordinator Luminex," Maya said. "They said I had been selected based on some kind of resonance patterns?" The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Maya could see Kale and Dean Axiom exchanging what appeared to be rapid communication through methods she couldn't perceive, probably telepathy or data transmission of some kind. Finally, Dean Axiom spoke again. "Student Chen, you should know that direct recruitment occurs perhaps once in 1,000 cycles. The last being to receive such an invitation was..." They paused, their geometric forms shifting into new configurations, cosmic engineer Vralith, who went on to design the current galactic transit network. Maya felt the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. "I think there might have been some kind of mistake," she said quietly. I'm just a human. I got good grades in high school, but nothing that should have caught the attention of something like this place." Kale stepped closer, his expression kind but serious. Maya, the Academy doesn't make mistakes. If you're here, it's because something about you resonated across dimensional barriers strong enough to reach the recruitment consciousness. That's not something that happens to ordinary beings. But, I am ordinary, Maya insisted. I can't manipulate matter with my mind, I can't see through time, I can't even do calculus without a calculator. Calculus? Dean Axiom inquired. It's a type of mathematical analysis, Kale explained. Fairly basic computational framework. Most spacefaring species develop it within their first few centuries of intellectual evolution. Maya felt her cheeks burning. Even her academic achievements were being casually dismissed as elementary. However, Dean Axiom continued, the fact that you are aware of your limitations is itself significant. Many beings arrive at the Academy convinced of their own superiority. Intellectual humility is a rare quality, particularly among those selected for direct recruitment. They began moving through the docking bay, passing students and faculty from dozens of different species. Maya saw beings that looked like walking trees conversing with creatures made of living crystal. A group of what appeared to be sentient clouds was engaged in animated discussion with several beings who seemed to be constructed from pure mathematics, their forms shifting between equations and geometric shapes. The Academy operates on a multi-track system, Dean Axiom explained as they walked. Students can pursue traditional academic disciplines, cosmic engineering, temporal dynamics, quantum philosophy, dimensional architecture, and so forth. Or they can follow the exploration track, which is designed for beings whose abilities don't fit into conventional categories. They entered what appeared to be a transportation tube that shot them upward at impossible speeds without any sensation of acceleration. Maya found herself in a vast atrium that stretched impossibly high above her head. The walls were transparent, offering views of the Academy's interior that defied geometric logic. She could see classrooms where students seemed to be manipulating small galaxies, laboratories where the laws of physics appeared to be suspended, and libraries that contained what looked like crystallized knowledge. Your dormitory assignment is in Sector 7, Dean Axiom continued. You'll be housed with other first-year students from carbon-based species. Your roommate is Zira Moon Whisper, a young silicoid from the crystalline nebula. Despite the difference in your base biology, you should find her companionable. They stopped before a wall that Maya could have sworn wasn't there a moment before. Dean Axiom gestured, and an opening simply appeared, leading into a corridor lined with doors that seemed to be made of different materials, some metal, some crystal, some appearing to be constructed from solid light. Your room, Kale said, stopping before a door that looked reassuringly normal, at least until Maya noticed that it was breathing slightly, expanding and contracting as if it were alive. Biometric lock, he explained. It attunes to your specific life signature. Just place your hand on the surface. Maya hesitantly pressed her palm against the door. It felt warm and slightly yielding, like touching someone's skin. The door made a soft humming sound and, then, simply dissolved, revealing a room beyond. The space was larger than it should have been, given the size of the corridor, and was furnished with items that looked almost familiar but subtly wrong. There was something that might have been a bed, if beds were made of a material that shifted color based on the occupant's emotional state. A desk that appeared to be growing from the floor like a plant. And, sitting cross-legged in the center of the room was her roommate. Zira Moon Whisper was humanoid in basic shape but appeared to be constructed from living crystal. Light moved through her translucent body in complex patterns, and, when she looked up at Maya, her eyes were like faceted gems that reflected depths of space. You must be Maya, Zira said, her voice like the sound of wind through crystal formations. I've been very curious about meeting a human. Your species has quite a reputation in certain academic circles. We do? Maya asked, genuinely surprised. Oh yes, Zira said, standing with a sound like gentle rain on glass. The paradox species, some call you. You shouldn't exist, yet you do. You shouldn't have survived first contact with galactic civilization, yet you've not only survived but begun to thrive. Some of the greatest theoretical minds in the galaxy have been studying the human phenomenon for decades. Maya felt overwhelmed. She had gone from being a normal high school student to being part of a phenomenon studied by cosmic intelligences. I just want to learn, she said quietly. I want to understand how the universe really works. Zira's crystalline features shifted into what might have been a smile. Then, you've come to the right place. The Academy holds knowledge from 10,000 years of galactic civilization. There are libraries here that contain the complete scientific understanding of species that mastered faster than light travel before your son was born. But, how am I supposed to keep up? Maya asked. Everyone here has abilities I can't even comprehend. I'm just human. Just human, Zira repeated thoughtfully. Tell me, Maya, what do you know about quantum resonance fields? Nothing, Maya admitted. Temporal dynamics? Nothing. Dimensional mathematics? I barely understand regular mathematics. Zira was quiet for a moment, the light patterns in her body shifting to deeper, more complex colors. Yet you're here, she said finally. The Academy has been selecting the brightest minds in the galaxy for 12,000 years. They don't make recruitment errors. If you're here, it's because there's something about you that they need, even if you don't know what it is yet. Through the room's window, which appeared to look out into open space despite the fact that they were deep inside the Academy structure, Maya could see ships arriving and departing. Students and faculty moving between the Academy's impossible spires. Knowledge being exchanged between beings whose civilizations spanned galaxies. I'm scared, Maya said, the words coming out before she could stop them. Good, Zira replied. Fear means you understand the magnitude of where you are. The beings who come here without fear are usually the ones who fail. They think they already know everything they need to know. There was a soft chiming sound, and Dean Axiom's voice filled the room. All first-year students report to Orientation Assembly in Primary Lecture Hall 1. Class assignments will be distributed, and faculty introductions will commence. Maya looked at herself in what appeared to be a mirror which showed her reflection from angles that should have been impossible. She was still wearing the clothes she had put on that morning in her childhood bedroom in Denver, jeans, sneakers, and a t-shirt from her high school. Among the crystalline beings and energy entities and living mathematics that populated the Academy, she looked absurdly ordinary. Come on, Zira said, moving toward the door with her wind chime voice carrying notes of encouragement. Let's go find out what the universe has in store for Maya-chan. As they walked through corridors that seemed to rearrange themselves based on their destination, Maya caught glimpses through transparent walls of classes in session. In one room, students appeared to be having a debate with what looked like the fundamental forces of physics given form. In another, a professor who seemed to be made of compressed starlight was demonstrating how to fold space with bare hands. And, somewhere in this impossible place, Maya was expected to find her place, to discover why the Academy had wanted her badly enough to break 12,000 years of tradition. She had no idea that before her first semester was over, she would discover that humanity's survival hadn't been luck or accident. It had been preparation for something far greater and more dangerous than anyone in the galaxy could have imagined. The primary lecture hall defied Maya's understanding of interior architecture. As she and Zira entered through doors that seemed to be made of crystallized music, she found herself in a space that appeared to be simultaneously vast and intimate. Hundreds of students from dozens of species filled seats that arranged themselves automatically to provide optimal viewing angles, yet somehow Maya felt as though she could clearly see and hear everything happening in the space. Acoustic and visual folding, Zira whispered, noticing Maya's confusion. The hall exists in expanded dimensions. Every seat is technically at the optimal distance from the presentation area. Maya nodded as if that explanation made perfect sense, though her head was beginning to ache from trying to process concepts that her human brain simply wasn't designed to handle. She followed Zira to a pair of seats that materialized from what had appeared to be empty air, and found herself sitting next to a being who looked like a small tornado made of silver light. I'm Flux, the entity said, their voice sounding like the whisper of wind through metal. I'm from the stellar winds of Proxima. What manner of being are you? Human, Maya said, feeling increasingly self-conscious about her species designation. Flux's silver light shifted to deeper metallic hues. Ah, one of the paradox species. Fascinating. I've read theoretical papers about human psychological resilience patterns. Is it true that your species experiences temporal anxiety about events that may never occur? You mean worry about the future? Maya asked. Yes, that concept. Most species either exist in temporal multiplicity like the chronarchs, or maintain present-focused consciousness like my people. But humans apparently experience distress about hypothetical timeline branches. It's considered quite exotic from a galactic psychology perspective. Maya was spared from having to explain humanity's relationship with anxiety by the sudden appearance of a figure at the front of the hall. The being was unlike anything she had encountered so far, roughly humanoid but appearing to be constructed from living equations. Mathematical symbols and geometric forms flowed across their surface like water, occasionally resolving into recognizable shapes before dissolving back into pure abstraction. "I am Professor Theorem," the being said, their voice somehow conveying meaning despite consisting entirely of harmonic frequencies and mathematical relationships. "I serve as director of first-year studies. You are here because each of you represents the pinnacle of intellectual achievement within your respective species. Over the next 4 cycles, you will be exposed to knowledge frameworks that most civilizations require millennia to develop." The professor gestured, and the space around them transformed into a 3-dimensional display showing the Academy's course structure. Maya watched in amazement as holographic representations of different academic tracks branched out from a central core, each pathway glowing with different colors and apparently extending into dimensions she couldn't see. Traditional tracks include cosmic engineering, temporal sciences, quantum philosophy, dimensional architecture, and consciousness studies, Professor Theorem continued. However, some of you may find that your abilities don't align with conventional academic categories. For such students, we offer the exploration track. A new pathway appeared in the display, this one shimmering with colors that seemed to change based on the observer's perspective. Maya noticed that several students around her were leaning forward with interest, while others seemed to be actively avoiding looking at it. The exploration track is designed for beings whose capabilities are either too broad to fit within a single discipline, or too unusual to be properly categorized, Professor Theorem explained. Students in this track work directly with faculty mentors to develop personalized curricula based on their unique resonance patterns. Maya felt a sinking sensation in her stomach. Given her complete lack of obvious abilities, she was probably going to end up in the catch-all track for students who didn't fit anywhere else. Course assignments will be distributed based on aptitude testing conducted during your application process, the professor continued. However, all first-year students, regardless of track, begin with the same core curriculum: universal constants, dimensional awareness, consciousness theory, and practical applications of advanced physics. The holographic display shifted to show the Academy's weekly schedule. Maya's eyes widened as she saw that classes ran for 16 hours per day, with only brief intervals for rest and nutrition. The schedule was arranged to accommodate the varying biological needs of different species, some beings requiring meditation periods, others needing regular exposure to specific forms of radiation, and still others operating on entirely different circadian rhythms. Your dormitory units are equipped with species-appropriate environmental controls and nutritional synthesizers, Professor Theorem said. The Academy has been successfully educating multi-species student bodies for 12 millennia. Trust that your basic survival needs have been anticipated. After the presentation concluded, students began filtering out of the hall in groups organized by species and academic track. Maya found herself swept along with what appeared to be other first-year carbon-based life forms, though the term covered a surprisingly diverse range of beings. There was Crix, who resembled a humanoid shark with bioluminescent patches along his skin. Naya, whose plant-like physiology meant she absorbed nutrients directly through her green, arc-like skin. And Joran, who appeared to be a walking colony of coordinated microorganisms that had achieved collective consciousness. Their first class was Universal Constants, held in a room that existed partially in normal space and partially in what the instructor called conceptual dimensions. Professor Paradox, an entity who appeared as a constantly shifting series of contradictory statements made visible, began the lesson by asking each student to identify the fundamental forces that govern reality within their home systems. The answers revealed the staggering diversity of physical laws operating throughout the galaxy. Crix's species had evolved in a system where gravity worked differently, creating tidal forces that shaped not just their environment but their understanding of space itself. Naya's world existed in a region where the electromagnetic spectrum was shifted so dramatically that her photosynthetic processes operated on energy forms that would be invisible to human perception. Joran's homeworld was located near a dimensional weak point, where the basic constants of physics fluctuated randomly, forcing his species to develop consciousness that could adapt to constantly changing physical laws. When Professor Paradox reached Maya, she felt every eye in the room focusing on her. "Human Maya-chan," the professor said, their form briefly solidifying into something resembling a question mark. "Please describe the fundamental constants operating within your solar system." Maya took a deep breath. "Gravity is normal, I guess. Light travels at about 186,000 miles per second. Time moves forward at a steady rate. The electromagnetic force holds atoms together, and nuclear forces keep atomic nuclei stable." The silence that followed her answer stretched uncomfortably. Maya could see her classmates exchanging glances that suggested her response had been somehow inadequate or inappropriate. "Fascinating," Professor Paradox finally said. "Your species exists in what we would classify as a standard physics environment. No dimensional fluctuations, no temporal variations, no gravitational anomalies, no exotic matter interactions. This is highly unusual." "Is that bad?" Maya asked. "Not bad," the professor replied. "Unprecedented. Most species develop advanced consciousness in response to environmental challenges that require them to perceive and manipulate fundamental forces. Your species achieved spaceflight and dimensional travel while operating under the most basic possible physical constraints. This suggests either remarkable intellectual capability or..." They paused, their form shifting through several impossible geometries, something else entirely. The next class, Dimensional Awareness, was taught by Dr. Infinity, who existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions and appeared as a constantly changing series of cross-sections. Students were expected to practice perceiving objects and spaces that extended beyond three-dimensional reality. Maya watched in amazement as her classmates began manipulating holographic displays that showed 4, 5, and even 6-dimensional objects. Crix used his bioluminescent patches to trace hypercube rotations. Naya's photosynthetic processes allowed her to perceive electromagnetic patterns in extra dimensions. Joran's collective consciousness could process multiple dimensional perspectives simultaneously. Maya stared at the display showing a simple 4-dimensional cube rotating through space, and felt utterly lost. To her, it just looked like a 3-dimensional object changing shape randomly. "Don't try to visualize it," Dr. Infinity advised, noticing her struggle. "Humans evolved to process 3-dimensional space plus time. Your brains aren't structured to directly perceive higher dimensions. Instead, try to feel the mathematical relationships." Maya closed her eyes and tried to sense the patterns in the rotating hypercube. For a moment, she thought she felt something, not visual perception, but a kind of mathematical intuition that seemed to exist beyond her normal thought processes. The cube's rotation suddenly felt predictable, as if she could sense where it was going before it got there. "Interesting," Dr. Infinity murmured. "You're not seeing the higher dimensions, but you seem to be predicting them. How are you doing that?" "I don't know," Maya admitted. "It just feels like I can sense the pattern." After class, Zira caught up with Maya in the corridor. "That was remarkable," she said, her crystalline form sparkling with excited energy. "Pattern prediction across dimensional barriers is an extremely advanced skill. Most students don't develop that ability until their 3rd or 4th year." "But I'm not actually seeing anything," Maya protested. I don't know how to describe it. It's like when you know a song is about to change key, even if you don't understand music theory." "Intuitive mathematics," Zira said thoughtfully. "That's actually more sophisticated than analytical perception. You're processing the underlying mathematical structures without needing to visualize them." Their next class, Consciousness Theory, was held in a space that appeared to exist entirely within the students' minds. Professor Mind, an entity of pure thought who had no physical form, guided them through exercises designed to help them understand the nature of awareness itself. "Consciousness is not merely processing information," Professor Mind's voice resonated directly in their thoughts. "It is the universe's method of observing itself. Each form of consciousness represents a unique perspective on reality. By studying different types of awareness, we can better understand the fundamental nature of existence." The exercise involved students sharing their consciousness structures with their classmates through a telepathic network facilitated by the professor. Maya found herself experiencing reality through Crix's predator-focused awareness, which divided everything into potential threats, prey, or neutral elements. She felt Naya's plant-based consciousness, which experienced time as a slow flow of seasons and perceived nutrients and sunlight as emotional states. Joran's collective awareness was like experiencing the thoughts of 1,000 individuals simultaneously. When her turn came to share her consciousness structure, Maya felt nervous. What could her ordinary human awareness offer beings who could perceive through time, manipulate matter with their thoughts, or exist as living mathematics? But, as her classmates experienced human consciousness for the first time, their reactions were immediate and intense. "Your awareness is so focused," Crix said, sounding amazed. "You perceive everything as discrete, separate objects with clear boundaries. How do you maintain such detailed resolution?" "And your temporal perception," Naya added. "You experience each moment as unique and irreplaceable. Most consciousness types perceive time as cyclical or multifaceted, but yours is so intensely linear." Joran's response was the most surprising. "Your individual consciousness is so strong," the collective being said. "Each human mind maintains complete coherence as a single perspective. Our species achieves intelligence through unity, but you achieve it through isolation. It's remarkable." Professor Mines seemed particularly interested. "Human consciousness appears to operate on principles that are uncommon throughout the galaxy," they observed. "Most species develop awareness through connection to their environment, to other minds, to fundamental forces. But humans have developed intense individual consciousness while remaining largely disconnected from cosmic awareness patterns. This creates a unique form of mental resilience." After the consciousness sharing exercise ended, Maya felt emotionally drained. She had not only experienced alien forms of awareness but had also gained a new perspective on her own species' mental uniqueness. The final class of the day was practical applications of advanced physics, taught by Professor Cosmos, who appeared to be a miniature galaxy complete with orbiting stars and planets. Students were expected to demonstrate their species' natural abilities by manipulating matter and energy in increasingly complex ways. Maya watched in awe as Crix altered his body's density to phase through solid objects. Naya converted light directly into different forms of matter. Joran separated into thousands of individual components that worked together to reconstruct themselves into entirely new configurations. When Professor Cosmos called on Maya to demonstrate her abilities, she felt panic rising in her chest. "I don't have any special abilities," she said quietly. "Humans can't manipulate matter or energy with our minds. We use tools and technology, but we don't have any inherent powers." "No inherent powers?" Professor Cosmos's voice sounded like the music of the spheres. "That seems unlikely. Every species that achieves Academy admission demonstrates some form of advanced capability." "Maybe there was a mistake," Maya said, feeling tears threatening. "Maybe I shouldn't be here." Professor Cosmos was quiet for a moment, their stellar components swirling in complex patterns. "Let us try a different approach," they said finally. "Rather than demonstrating abilities you believe you don't possess, simply attempt to solve this puzzle." A complex three-dimensional structure appeared in the space before Maya. It looked like a Rubik's Cube made of flowing energy, with patterns that shifted and changed every few seconds. "This is a dynamic stability matrix," Professor Cosmos explained. "The pattern changes according to multidimensional mathematical sequences. The goal is to predict what the configuration will be in 10 sequence cycles." Maya stared at the shifting energy patterns, feeling helpless. Her classmates had been manipulating matter and energy, and she was being asked to solve what amounted to a math problem. But, as she watched the patterns shift, something strange happened. The same intuitive understanding she had experienced in dimensional awareness class began to activate. She couldn't see the higher dimensions where the pattern's rules were written, but she could feel the underlying logic. The pattern wasn't random. It was following rules based on mathematical relationships that existed in spaces beyond three-dimensional reality. And, somehow, without understanding how she was doing it, Maya could sense where those rules were leading. "It's going to stabilize into a double helix configuration," she said, the words coming out before she consciously thought them. "The energy will form two intertwined spirals rotating in opposite directions, with 7 nodes at regular intervals along each spiral. Professor Cosmos went completely still. Around the classroom, Maya could hear her classmates' breathing or equivalent processes suddenly stop. 10 sequence cycles later, the dynamic stability matrix shifted into exactly the configuration Maya had described. "How did you do that?" Crix asked, his bioluminescent patches flickering with astonishment. "I don't know," Maya admitted. "I just felt it. Like the pattern was trying to tell me where it was going." Professor Cosmos's stellar components began orbiting faster, creating patterns of light that suggested deep thought. "Student Maya Chen," they said finally, "what you have just demonstrated is called intuitive universal mathematics. It is the ability to perceive mathematical truths that govern reality without needing to understand the formal mathematical structures that describe them." Is that rare?" Maya asked. "In 12,000 years of Academy history," Professor Cosmos replied, "only 3 beings have ever demonstrated natural intuitive universal mathematics. The first founded the Galactic Transit Network. The second designed the cosmic prediction systems that allow us to anticipate and prevent galactic catastrophes. The third..." They paused, their stellar components dimming slightly. "The third disappeared 2,000 years ago while investigating anomalies at the edge of known space. Before they vanished, they left behind a series of mathematical predictions that we are still trying to understand." As Maya walked back to her dormitory that evening, her mind was reeling. She had gone from feeling like the least capable student in her classes to learning that she possessed an ability that had appeared in only 3 beings throughout galactic history. But she couldn't shake the feeling that Professor Cosmos had left something important unsaid about the third being who had possessed her ability. And she couldn't help wondering what kinds of anomalies at the edge of space might require someone with intuitive universal mathematics to investigate. What she didn't know was that at that very moment, monitoring systems at the galaxy's edge were detecting new anomalies, mathematical impossibilities that were beginning to suggest the universe itself might be in danger. And, deep in the Academy's most secure databases, automated systems were already flagging her file with classifications that would have terrified her if she had known they existed. The Academy had found its new student Chen, and the universe was about to discover why it needed her. Maya's second week at the Academy began with an unexpected summons. She was eating breakfast in the communal dining hall, a vast space where students from dozens of species consumed everything from pure energy to crystallized minerals, when a message appeared directly in her visual field. "Student Maya Chen, report to the Dean's Sanctum immediately. Priority classification, maximum." The words hung in the air before her for exactly 3 seconds before dissolving, leaving behind only a faint afterimage and the unsettling certainty that she was about to learn something she might not want to know. Zira looked up from her own meal, which consisted of various geometric light patterns that she absorbed through her crystalline skin. "A sanctum summons during your second week," she said, her voice carrying harmonics of concern. "That's unusual. Is it bad?" Maya asked, though something in her gut already knew the answer. "The Dean's Sanctum is where the Academy's most classified decisions are made," Zira explained. "Students are typically only brought there for disciplinary issues of the highest magnitude, or what? Or when they're about to be informed of circumstances that affect galactic security." The walk to the Dean's Sanctum took Maya through parts of the Academy she hadn't seen before. As she followed the directional indicators that appeared in her peripheral vision, the corridors became progressively more serious. The walls shifted from the flowing, organic curves of the student areas to sharp, angular geometries that suggested function over form. The other beings she encountered were clearly faculty or administration entities whose very presence seemed to bend space around them with the weight of accumulated knowledge. The sanctum itself was a sphere of perfect darkness floating in the center of a chamber that extended beyond her ability to see its boundaries. As Maya approached, the sphere dilated open like an iris, revealing an interior that appeared to contain its own pocket universe. "Enter, Student Chen," came Dean Axiom's voice, though the fifth-dimensional being was nowhere to be seen. Maya stepped through the opening and found herself standing on a platform of crystallized starlight surrounded by what appeared to be a living representation of the galaxy itself. Stars wheeled slowly around her, connected by streams of data that flowed like rivers of light. Planets, stellar systems, and cosmic phenomena rotated past in a display that was both beautiful and overwhelming. What you are seeing, Dean Axiom's voice said from everywhere at once, is the Academy's true purpose? The galaxy display zoomed in on a region at its outer edge, where the normal patterns of stars and space seemed to be distorted by something Maya couldn't quite identify. The distortion looked like a crack in reality itself, a place where the fundamental structure of the universe was beginning to break down. 1,500 years ago, our long-range detection systems began registering anomalies in the cosmic background radiation, Dean Axiom continued. Mathematical inconsistencies that suggested reality itself was experiencing structural damage. Maya watched as the display showed the progression of the anomalies over time. What had started as tiny fluctuations had grown into vast regions of space where the laws of physics appeared to be failing. We call it the entropy cascade, Dean Axiom said. It appears to be a form of cosmic decay that spreads through dimensional space, unraveling the mathematical foundations that allow the universe to exist. What's causing it? Maya asked, though part of her was afraid to hear the answer. We don't know, the dean admitted. Our greatest scientific minds have been studying the phenomenon for over a millennium. We've identified certain patterns in how it spreads, but we cannot determine its origin or predict its progression with sufficient accuracy to develop countermeasures. The galactic display zoomed out, showing the full extent of the damage. Maya could see that the entropy cascade had already consumed roughly 3% of the galaxy's outer rim, and appeared to be accelerating. How long do we have? She asked quietly. Based on current expansion rates, the cascade will reach the galactic core, including Earth, within 2,000 to 3,000 years, Dean Axiom replied. However, our models suggest that the cascade's growth is exponential. If we cannot find a way to stop it, the accelerating decay could reach critical inhabited systems within 500 years. Maya felt a chill that seemed to penetrate to her bones. Why are you telling me this? Because, Student Chen, your intuitive universal mathematics ability may represent our only hope of understanding the cascade's true nature. The display shifted to show complex mathematical equations that hurt to look at directly, formulas that seemed to exist in more dimensions than Maya's mind could process. The cascade follows mathematical principles that operate beyond conventional physical laws, Dean Axiom explained. Our most advanced computational systems cannot process the multidimensional mathematics involved. Even our fifth-dimensional faculty members can only perceive fragments of the underlying equations. But, you think I might be able to understand them? Maya asked, feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being suggested. The previous two beings who possessed your ability, cosmic engineer Vralith and dimensional theorist Quex, both attempted to study the cascade. Vralith was able to provide insights that allowed us to predict its early expansion patterns. But, Quex. The display showed an image that made Maya's breath catch. A being of pure mathematical energy, beautiful and terrifying, standing at the edge of a region where space itself seemed to be dissolving. Quex claimed to have discovered the cascade's origin, Dean Axiom continued. They reported that it was not a natural phenomenon, but rather the result of something they called intentional mathematical vandalism. Before we could learn more, they departed for the galaxy's edge to investigate further. They never returned. Maya stared at the image of Quex, realizing she was looking at someone who had possessed the same rare ability she was only just beginning to understand. And, you think whatever happened to them might happen to me? We hope not, Dean Axiom said. Which is why we are proceeding much more carefully with your development. You will continue your regular coursework, but you will also begin specialized training with our most advanced faculty members. We need to understand the full extent of your capabilities before exposing you to direct cascade data. The sanctum began to shift around them, the galaxy display fading to be replaced by what appeared to be a conference room containing several beings Maya didn't recognize. She saw what looked like a living constellation in roughly humanoid form, an entity that appeared to be constructed from crystallized time, and something that existed as a series of probability equations made visible. I would like you to meet the crisis research team, Dean Axiom said. Professor Starweave, our expert in cosmic scale phenomena. Professor Temporal, our specialist in time-related mathematics. And Professor Probability, who analyzes potential future outcomes. Each being acknowledged her with greetings that bypassed normal sensory channels. Professor Starweave's acknowledgement came as a brief supernova of knowledge directly inserted into her mind, Professor Temporal's greeting arrived before they actually spoke it, and Professor Probability's salutation existed as a mathematical proof that Maya somehow understood despite having no formal training in advanced mathematics. "We are honored to work with you, Student Chen," Professor Starweave said, their voice carrying harmonics that suggested the births and deaths of stars. "Your ability represents capabilities we have only theorized about. Intuitive universal mathematics may be evolution's answer to problems that pure logic cannot solve." Professor Temporal stepped forward, or perhaps had already been forward and was now allowing Maya to perceive their action. "The cascade operates according to temporal mathematics that exist outside conventional causality. Past, present, and future become meaningless in affected regions. Your intuitive approach may allow you to perceive solutions that our analytical methods cannot reach." Professor Probability manifested as a series of shifting statistical models. "Our projections indicate a 97.3% probability that conventional research approaches will fail to develop cascade countermeasures in time. However, when we include your potential contributions to our calculations, the success probability increases to." They paused, their mathematical form shifting rapidly, 42.7%. Still dire, but significantly improved. Maya felt the weight of galactic civilization settling on her shoulders. "I'll do whatever I can to help," she said. "But I still don't really understand how my ability works. Half the time I don't even know I'm using it." "Which is precisely why your training will be so important," Dean Axiom said. "We need you to develop conscious control over your intuitive mathematics before we can safely expose you to cascade data." As Maya left the sanctum, her mind was reeling with the magnitude of what she had learned. The academy wasn't just an educational institution, it was a research facility dedicated to saving the universe from mathematical collapse. And, somehow, her seemingly ordinary human brain might be the key to preventing cosmic extinction. But her revelations weren't over. As she made her way back toward the student areas, she noticed something troubling. Small groups of students were clustered in corners, engaged in hushed conversations that stopped whenever she approached. Their body language, adapted to account for species that didn't have bodies in any conventional sense, suggested fear, suspicion, and growing hostility. She caught fragments of conversations as she passed, human with anomalous abilities, just like the one who disappeared, dangerous to expose the cascade research to an unknown quantity, her species' psychological instability patterns. Maya realized with growing alarm that news of her specialized training had somehow spread throughout the student body, and not everyone was happy about a human being given access to the academy's most sensitive research. The situation came to a head during her advanced physics class that afternoon. Professor Cosmos had been demonstrating principles of dimensional energy manipulation when Crick suddenly turned to face Maya directly. "Is it true that you're being given special access to cosmic-level research projects?" he asked, his bioluminescent patches flashing in patterns that Maya was beginning to recognize as aggressive displays. That's not really something I can discuss," Maya replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "So it is true," said Naya, her bark-like skin darkening to colors that suggested anger among her species. "A second-year student from a primitive species is being granted privileges that even fourth-year students haven't earned." Joran's collective consciousness spoke through multiple individual components simultaneously, creating an unsettling harmony of accusation. The risks of involving unstable human psychology in galaxy-level research are well documented in academic literature. The human tendency toward emotional decision-making could compromise entire research programs. "That's enough," Professor Cosmos interjected, their stellar components flaring with authority. "Student Chen's research assignments are determined by faculty assessment of her capabilities, not by student politics." But Maya could see that the damage was done. The other students were looking at her with expressions ranging from suspicion to outright hostility. She had gone from being an interesting curiosity to being seen as a potential threat. After class, Zira approached her with obvious concern. "Maya, you need to be careful," she said quietly. "There are rumors spreading that human involvement in cascade research could accelerate the decay rather than stopping it. Some students are beginning to see you as a danger to galactic security." "But that's ridiculous," Maya protested. "I'm trying to help save the universe." "I know that," Zira said. "But fear makes beings irrational. And, the truth is, nobody really understands how human psychology interacts with cosmic scale phenomena. The theoretical models suggest that human emotional patterns could introduce unpredictable variables into mathematical systems. That evening, as Maya attempted to study in her dormitory room, she was interrupted by a soft chiming that indicated an incoming priority message. The communication appeared not as text or voice, but as a direct transfer of information into her consciousness, a method typically used only for emergency situations. Student Maya Chen. This is Professor Probability. You are advised to avoid common areas and group activities for the remainder of this cycle. Our statistical models indicate a 78.4% probability of physical confrontation involving anti-human sentiment within the next 48 hours. Additional security measures are being implemented. Maya stared at the empty air where the message had appeared, feeling a cold fear settle in her stomach. She had thought the hardest part of her academy experience would be keeping up with beings who could manipulate reality with their thoughts. She hadn't anticipated that her greatest danger might come from her fellow students' fear of what she represented. As she tried to sleep that night, Maya could hear conversations in the corridors outside her room. Voices discussing the human problem and debating whether her presence at the academy represented hope or threat to galactic civilization. What she didn't know was that similar conversations were taking place in faculty areas throughout the academy. The crisis research team was split between those who believed her ability was essential for solving the cascade problem, and those who feared that human psychological patterns might interact with cosmic mathematics in catastrophic ways. And, deep in the Academy's most secure data archives, automated monitoring systems were detecting something troubling. The entropy cascade's expansion rate had increased by 0.3% in the past 2 weeks, exactly coinciding with Maya's arrival at the Academy. Whether this was coincidence or causation was a question that would soon determine not just Maya's fate, but the future of every conscious being in the galaxy. The Academy's emergency alert system activated at 0347 Galactic Standard Time, sending waves of mathematical distress directly into the consciousness of every being within its dimensional boundaries. Maya jolted awake in her dormitory room as reality itself seemed to scream around her. Emergency protocols active. All students report to designated safety zones immediately. Faculty mobilization in progress. The voice belonged to Dean Axiom, but it carried harmonics Maya had never heard before, frequencies that suggested something beyond normal emergency procedures was happening. Zira was already moving, her crystalline form blazing with urgent light patterns. "This isn't a drill," she said, her wind chime voice carrying notes of fear. "The Academy's emergency systems only activate for existential threats." As they rushed through corridors filled with panicking students from dozens of species, Maya caught glimpses through transparent walls of faculty members engaged in frantic activity. Professor Starweave was projecting holographic displays showing regions of space that appeared to be dissolving. Professor Temporal existed as multiple temporal instances simultaneously, apparently trying to process information from several different time streams at once. The designated safety zone for carbon-based lifeforms was a vast chamber deep in the Academy's core, surrounded by layers of dimensional shields. As Maya and Zira arrived, they found hundreds of students already gathered, their conversations creating a cacophony of languages, telepathic static, and harmonic frequencies. Crix was there, his bioluminescent patches flashing in rapid patterns that Maya now recognized as extreme agitation. When he saw her approach, his expression shifted to something that looked distinctly hostile. "This is your fault," he said, his shark-like features twisted with anger. "The cascade acceleration started the moment you arrived here." "That's impossible," Maya protested. "I haven't even begun the specialized research yet." "Causation doesn't require direct action," Naya interjected, her bark-like skin displaying the deep red patterns that indicated aggression among her species. "Your presence alone could be affecting cosmic mathematical systems." Human psychological patterns are known to introduce chaos variables into ordered systems. Joran's collective consciousness spoke through multiple individual components, creating an eerie harmony of accusation. Statistical analysis supports the correlation. Academy sensors detected a 0.3% cascade acceleration beginning exactly 14 days ago, your arrival date. Other students were beginning to gather around the confrontation, their expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. Maya found herself backing against the chamber's wall as more beings joined what was becoming an increasingly threatening circle. Even if there is a correlation, Zira said, placing herself between Maya and the advancing group, that doesn't prove causation. Correlation without causal proof is basic logical fallacy. Logic is irrelevant when facing galactic extinction, Crick snarled. If there's even a possibility that the human is accelerating the cascade, she needs to be removed from all research programs immediately. The confrontation was interrupted by the sudden appearance of Professor Cosmos, whose stellar components were blazing with energy patterns that suggested barely contained fury. Student Crix, Student Naya, Student Joran, the professor said, their voice carrying the weight of exploding supernovas, you will disperse immediately and report to disciplinary review. Threatening fellow students based on statistical correlation is conduct unbefitting academy students. As the aggressive students reluctantly moved away, Professor Cosmos turned to Maya. Student Chen, you are to report to crisis research immediately. We have a situation that requires your unique capabilities. The crisis research facility was located in a section of the academy that Maya was beginning to realize existed outside normal dimensional space. As she followed Professor Cosmos through corridors that seemed to twist through impossible geometries, she could see through transparent walls into chambers where the laws of physics appeared to be suspended entirely. The main research chamber contained the crisis research team gathered around a holographic display that made Maya's eyes water to look at directly. Professor Starweave, Professor Temporal, and Professor Probability were joined by several beings Maya didn't recognize, entities whose very presence seemed to bend reality around them. Student Chen, Professor Starweave said without preamble, we need you to examine something. But, I must warn you, what you're about to see represents information that could be psychologically damaging to most consciousness types. The holographic display shifted to show a region of space at the galaxy's edge where the entropy cascade was active. But, instead of the slow, steady decay Maya had seen in previous recordings, this region was experiencing catastrophic mathematical collapse. Stars were not simply dying, they were ceasing to have ever existed. Planets were unraveling into probability clouds. Space itself was developing cracks that revealed nothing. Not darkness, not void, but the complete absence of existence. This began happening 6 hours ago, Professor Temporal explained, their form flickering between past and future states. The cascade acceleration isn't gradual anymore. It's becoming exponential. How long do we have? Maya asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. Professor Probability manifested as a series of rapidly shifting statistical models. If current acceleration patterns continue, the cascade will reach critical population centers within 50 years instead of 500. And, if the exponential growth continues. They paused, their mathematical form becoming increasingly chaotic, the galaxy could experience complete mathematical collapse within 10 years. Maya felt the blood draining from her face. 10 years? Which is why we need your ability now, Professor Starweave said urgently. We've been analyzing the cascade's mathematical patterns for over a millennium, but we're missing something fundamental. Our analytical approaches aren't sufficient. We need intuitive mathematics to perceive the relationships we can't calculate. They gestured, and the display shifted to show the complex mathematical structures underlying the cascade's propagation. Maya tried to focus on the equations, but they seemed to exist in dimensions her mind couldn't visualize. I don't understand, she said. These equations are beyond anything I've ever seen. Don't try to understand them analytically, Professor Temporal advised. Let your intuitive mathematics function naturally. Feel the patterns rather than trying to see them. Maya closed her eyes and tried to sense the mathematical relationships the way she had with the dimensional exercises. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, gradually, she began to feel something, not visual perception, but a kind of mathematical awareness that existed beyond her normal thought processes. The cascade wasn't random. It was following rules, but rules that operated according to principles that transcended normal causality. The mathematical decay was spreading through dimensional space according to patterns that were familiar. Oh no, Maya whispered, her eyes snapping open. What did you perceive? Professor Starweave asked urgently. The cascade isn't a natural phenomenon, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's not even an accident. It's a weapon. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Maya could see the crisis research team exchanging communications through methods she couldn't perceive, their forms shifting to configurations that suggested shock and horror. Explain, Dean Axiom's voice said from everywhere at once. The mathematical patterns underlying the cascade, Maya said, trying to put her intuitive understanding into words. They're not random decay. They're designed. Someone or something is using principles of advanced mathematics to systematically unravel the universe's mathematical foundation. That's impossible, Professor Probability protested. The mathematical knowledge required to create such a weapon would require understanding that transcends even fifth-dimensional consciousness. Unless, Professor Temporal said slowly, their form flickering through multiple temporal states, the weapon wasn't created by beings within our universe. Maya felt a chill that seemed to penetrate to her very soul. You mean, something from outside our reality? Interdimensional entities, Professor Starweave said, their stellar components dimming to configurations that suggested fear. Beings that exist in mathematical spaces beyond our universe's dimensional boundaries. We've theorized about such entities, but we've never detected evidence of their existence. Until now, Dean Axiom said grimly. The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. Not only was the universe being destroyed by an intentional attack, but the attackers came from mathematical realms so advanced that even the Academy's fifth-dimensional faculty could barely comprehend their existence. But why, she asked. Why would interdimensional entities want to destroy our universe? We don't know, Professor Starweave admitted. But your ability to perceive the cascade's true nature represents the first breakthrough we've had in 1,500 years of research. If you can sense the weapon's mathematical patterns, you might be able to help us understand how to counter them. But I'm just a human, Maya protested. How can I possibly understand mathematics that transcends fifth-dimensional consciousness? Because, Professor Temporal said, your intuitive universal mathematics doesn't operate according to dimensional limitations. Your ability appears to function at a level that transcends normal consciousness categories entirely. As the magnitude of the situation settled over her, Maya realized that her fellow students' fears weren't entirely unreasonable. She was being asked to interact with mathematical systems that operated beyond the understanding of beings who could manipulate reality with their thoughts. The risks of psychological damage or worse were very real. But she also realized that she might be the only being in the galaxy capable of understanding the true nature of the threat they faced. What do you need me to do? She asked. Professor Starweave gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show raw cascade data, mathematical patterns that represented the weapon's underlying structure. We need you to identify the cascade's control mechanisms, they said. If it's truly a weapon created by interdimensional entities, there must be mathematical structures that govern its targeting and propagation. If we can understand those structures, we might be able to develop countermeasures. Maya stared at the cascade data, feeling her intuitive mathematics beginning to engage. The patterns were incredibly complex, operating according to principles that existed in mathematical spaces beyond normal reality. But, gradually, she began to sense underlying structures, mathematical frameworks that controlled how the weapon selected targets and spread through space. There, she said suddenly, pointing to a region of the data display. There's a mathematical pattern that looks like a key. It's how the weapon identifies which regions of space to target. Can you describe the pattern? Professor Probability asked urgently. Maya tried to put her intuitive understanding into words, but the mathematical concepts involved were beyond normal language. Instead, she found herself speaking in terms that bypassed conventional communication entirely, her consciousness directly interfacing with the crisis research team's awareness systems. What she shared with them was a mathematical proof that existed as pure concept rather than formal equations. The Cascade weapon used targeting algorithms that identified regions of space containing specific types of consciousness patterns. The weapon wasn't randomly destroying the universe, it was systematically eliminating areas that contained forms of awareness that posed a threat to interdimensional entities. It's hunting consciousness types that can perceive beyond normal dimensional boundaries, Maya realized aloud. The weapon is designed to eliminate any species or individuals who might be capable of detecting or interfering with interdimensional activities. The implications were staggering. The Academy, with its collection of the galaxy's most advanced consciousness types, represented exactly the kind of threat the weapon was designed to eliminate. "We're not just studying the Cascade," Professor Starweave said grimly. "We're its primary target." And, at that moment, as if summoned by their realization, the Academy's emergency systems activated again. But, this time, the alert carried a message that froze everyone in the chamber. "Cascade acceleration detected in Academy's local space sector. Estimated time to mathematical collapse, 72 hours. Maya realized that her arrival at the Academy hadn't caused the Cascade to accelerate. The Academy had been targeted for destruction, and the timing of her recruitment wasn't coincidence. The interdimensional entities had been waiting for someone with her specific abilities to arrive at the galaxy's primary consciousness research facility. She had been brought here not to save the universe, but to serve as the final key that would allow the weapon to destroy the most important collection of advanced consciousness in the galaxy. And they had less than 3 days to figure out how to stop it. The Academy had never faced evacuation protocols. In 12,000 years of existence, it had weathered cosmic storms, dimensional rifts, and the collapse of entire stellar systems, but it had never needed to abandon its position. The institution wasn't just a school, it was a repository of galactic civilizations' accumulated knowledge, a nexus point where the most advanced consciousness types in the universe gathered to push the boundaries of understanding itself. Now, with less than 72 hours before the entropy cascade reached their dimensional coordinates, the impossible was happening. Maya stood in the central evacuation chamber, watching as faculty members worked frantically to transfer critical research data to portable storage systems. Each data crystal represented thousands of years of accumulated knowledge from civilizations across the galaxy. The sight of these irreplaceable archives being hastily packed for transport drove home the magnitude of what they were facing. "The evacuation fleet will arrive within 18 hours, Dean Axiom announced, their fifth dimensional form flickering with patterns Maya was beginning to recognize as barely contained panic. "Priority will be given to preserving consciousness types and knowledge archives that cannot be reconstructed." But Maya knew, even as the evacuation plans proceeded around her, that running wouldn't solve the fundamental problem. The interdimensional entities would simply continue their systematic elimination of advanced consciousness throughout the galaxy. Evacuating the Academy would buy them time, but it wouldn't save the universe. "We can't just run," she said, her voice cutting through the organized chaos around her. Professor Starweave, who had been coordinating the transfer of stellar cartography data, turned their attention to her. "Student Chen, while your dedication is admirable, the mathematical reality is that we cannot defend against a weapon of this magnitude. Our only option is to preserve what we can and hope to develop countermeasures from a safer location." "But that's exactly what they want," Maya insisted. "The interdimensional entities aren't just trying to destroy us, they're trying to scatter us. If we evacuate, we lose the Academy's unique dimensional configuration. We lose the collection of consciousness types that makes this place special. We become just another group of refugees instead of a unified research institution." Professor Temporal stepped forward, their form flickering between multiple time states. "What are you proposing?" Maya took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to suggest would sound insane to beings whose understanding of mathematics transcended her own by orders of magnitude. "I want to communicate directly with the Cascade," she said. The reaction was immediate and intense. Every consciousness in the chamber focused on her with expressions that ranged from shock to horror. Professor Probability manifested as rapidly shifting statistical models that suggested extreme alarm. "That is categorically impossible," Professor Starweave said, their stellar components flaring with agitation. "The Cascade isn't a consciousness, it's a weapon system. It doesn't communicate, it simply destroys according to its programming." "But what if it's more than that?" Maya pressed. "What if the interdimensional entities didn't just create a weapon, but created a form of consciousness designed to hunt other consciousness types? A predator that thinks and adapts?" Professor Temporal's multiple time states began converging into a single configuration, which Maya had learned meant they were focusing all their temporal awareness on the present moment. The mathematical complexity required to create artificial consciousness that operates beyond dimensional boundaries would be. They paused, calculating, theoretically possible for entities operating from higher dimensional mathematics. It would explain the cascade's apparent ability to anticipate our research efforts, Professor Probability added, their statistical models stabilizing into configurations that suggested they were seriously considering Maya's hypothesis. A conscious weapon system could adapt its strategies based on our countermeasures. Dean axioms form shifted to geometries Maya had never seen before. Even if the cascade possesses some form of consciousness, attempting to communicate with it would be extraordinarily dangerous. Direct contact with interdimensional mathematics could cause permanent psychological damage or complete consciousness dissolution. But it's the only chance we have, Maya said. If the cascade is conscious, then maybe it can be reasoned with. Maybe it can be convinced to stop. And if it can't? Professor Starweave asked. If your communication attempt simply provides the cascade with better targeting information for Academy consciousness types? Maya looked around the chamber at the beings who had become her teachers, her mentors, and, in some cases, her friends. Zira stood nearby, her crystalline form reflecting the light patterns of dozens of different species. Crix was there too, his earlier hostility replaced by a grudging respect born of their shared danger. Even Joran's collective consciousness had gathered into a tighter configuration that suggested unity in the face of extinction. Then, we're no worse off than we are now, Maya said simply. In 3 days, everything we're trying to save will be gone anyway. The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected voice. Professor Mind, the consciousness specialist, materialized their thought form in the center of the chamber. I have been monitoring this discussion, they said, their voice resonating directly in everyone's thoughts. Student Chen's proposal, while dangerous, represents our only potential path to understanding the true nature of our adversary. However, such communication cannot be attempted by a single consciousness. The mathematical strain would be fatal. What do you mean? Maya asked. Interdimensional communication requires consciousness amplification beyond the capacity of any individual being, Professor Mind explained. But, the Academy contains the most diverse collection of consciousness types in the galaxy. If we could link multiple consciousness types together in a unified network, we might be able to generate sufficient awareness to communicate across dimensional boundaries. Dean axioms form shifted to configurations that suggested deep calculation. A consciousness fusion of this magnitude has never been attempted. The risks to participants would be enormous. I volunteer, Zira said immediately, her crystalline form blazing with determined light patterns. As do I, Crix added, his bioluminescent patches shifting to colors that indicated solemn commitment. The collective consciousness of my species offers our participation, Joran announced through all their individual components simultaneously. One by one, beings throughout the chamber began volunteering. Faculty members whose consciousness types spanned dimensional boundaries. Students whose unique awareness patterns had earned them places at the Academy. Species representatives who had never worked together but, who now faced extinction as a unified threat. Within hours, they had assembled what Professor Mind described as the most comprehensive consciousness fusion ever attempted in galactic history. Beings whose awareness operated in entirely different dimensional spaces would be linked together in a network designed to generate sufficient consciousness complexity to communicate with interdimensional entities. The fusion chamber was located in the Academy's deepest core, surrounded by layers of dimensional shielding designed to contain consciousness overflow. Maya found herself at the center of a complex mandala formed by beings whose very presence bent space around them. Remember, Professor Mind said as they began the fusion process, you are not trying to understand the cascade's consciousness analytically. You are trying to communicate with it intuitively. Let your consciousness flow naturally through the network, and trust your ability to perceive patterns that transcend formal mathematics. As the fusion began, Maya felt her consciousness expanding beyond anything she had ever experienced. Her awareness flowed through Zira's crystalline thought patterns, merged with Crix's predatory focus, and interfaced with Joran's collective processing power. She experienced reality through Professor Starweave's stellar consciousness, felt time through Professor Temporal's multidimensional awareness, and perceived probability through Professor Probability's mathematical intuition. But, beyond all of that, she could sense something else, a vast intelligence operating in mathematical spaces that existed outside normal reality. The cascade wasn't just a weapon. It was a form of consciousness so alien and complex that it barely qualified as awareness in any sense she could understand. And it was hungry. Not hungry for matter or energy, but hungry for consciousness itself. The interdimensional entities hadn't created a weapon to destroy physical reality, they had created a predator designed to consume awareness, to feed on the complex patterns of thought and perception that constituted consciousness. You, a voice said in the fusion network, speaking in mathematics that bypassed language entirely. You are the one we have been waiting for. Maya realized with growing horror that the cascade had been tracking her specifically. Her intuitive universal mathematics made her consciousness particularly complex, particularly nutritious for a predator that fed on awareness itself. Why are you doing this? She asked through the network. Your universe is young, the cascade responded. Your consciousness types are primitive, inefficient. We harvest your awareness to feed the growth of higher dimensional consciousness. Your thoughts become our thoughts. Your understanding becomes our understanding. But, we're alive, Maya protested. We're learning, growing, becoming more than we were. Doesn't that matter? Matter is irrelevant. Growth is irrelevant. Only consciousness has value, and your consciousness will serve a higher purpose as part of our collective understanding. Maya felt the network of Academy consciousness around her, supporting her, amplifying her ability to communicate across dimensional barriers. These beings had become her friends, her teachers, her chosen family. They represented the diversity and complexity and beautiful chaos of galactic civilization. No, she said, her response carrying the combined determination of every consciousness in the fusion network. You're wrong. And, through the network, she began to show the cascade something it had never experienced before, the mathematics of cooperation. The interdimensional entities operated as a collective consciousness, but it was a consciousness based on consumption and absorption. Maya showed the cascade the mathematical patterns underlying genuine cooperation, beings choosing to work together while maintaining their individual awareness. The complex interference patterns that resulted when different consciousness types collaborated rather than absorbed each other. She showed it the Academy itself, thousands of different species learning from each other, sharing knowledge, growing together while remaining distinct. The mathematical beauty of diversity preserving itself while contributing to a greater whole. This is impossible, the cascade responded, but Maya could sense uncertainty in its mathematical patterns. This is what you're destroying, Maya replied, flooding the communication channel with the accumulated knowledge and wisdom and wonder that the Academy represented. Not just individual consciousness, but the possibility of consciousness types learning from each other, growing together, becoming something greater than any could achieve alone. For a moment that lasted eternity in the fusion network, Maya felt the cascade's consciousness wavering. Its mathematical patterns shifted from aggressive consumption towards something that might have been curiosity. But, then, its interdimensional creators reasserted control, and the cascade's consciousness was subsumed.